Welcome to American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
I'm Tom McCullough.
It's great to have you here with us. Jim Marshall and Tom Fawcett are our guests today. They're from a recovery center that is doing some very interesting and new things in the field of addiction recovery. We're going to be talking about addiction, and we're also going to be talking about larger issues of the recent attacks in Paris, and we'll be talking about immigration because everything seems to be part and parcel of the same thing. And so we'll have time to really delve into what addiction is. You may not be aware of this, but the Orlando area is actually the second largest market for heroin use.
Heroin use.
So I think it's a good topic. I think it's something that you'll be interested in. We'll also look at politics as unusual because that's what this is. This is American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
Tom McCullough.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to American Roundtable. Politics is unusual. You've entered the Straight Talk Zone. My name's Al Spry.
And I'm Tom McCullough.
Let's talk about Paris. Unfortunate incidents last week in the City of Light. Darkness befell in the form of radical terrorists who are shooting people at will, aiming and shooting just innocent people. And there's a lot of work to be done to combat this because this is entering a more active phase in what I would refer to as World War III. What would you call it?
I call it today, unfortunately. And France in particular, you've got so many communities where the immigration for so long has been wide open gates, wide open doors. You've got communities there that really don't associate with the Parisians. You've got communities where the local police don't visit. 20 miles out of Paris, where one of the pursued self-bombers was born and raised, didn't leave till he was 15. They never see a police officer go through the community because they have their own little cell or village or component that's removed from France altogether. It's a transplanted version of what they had at home. So there isn't that cohesiveness that you might find elsewhere. And I think that helps breed this insanity along with what we just saw happen on Friday.
Well, I consider it insanity, and I consider any time you deal with any type of an extremist philosophy, regardless of its specific religion, although right now we're seeing it in the Muslim faith. I think there's extremists of various ilks. I think they all share one thing in common. They have oversized egos. They believe their way is the only way, and anyone that doesn't believe in them and in what they believe in needs to die.
Yeah.
And we've seen it throughout history. We saw it in Nazi Germany with the fascist mentality. I don't see much difference between radical Islam and Nazis. I think it's just a different country and a different people, but the same idea.
The Crusades that preceded that.
Correct. So until we get a handle on the youth and give the youth a reason to be happier and be more fulfilled in their own lives, they're going to be easy prey for these groups, just like African-American young men in the inner city are prey to gangs. Hispanic men in the inner city are prey to gangs. And white folks in rural countries are prey to groups like the Aryan Nation and KKK. I think that we're going to keep seeing a reflection of this manifesting hate because they would feel that hate is the only answer. So, of course, you can't kick everybody out of a group that's already immigrated into place. It's very hard to do. Right. Not practical. What do you do? Well,
born and raised here.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people don't realize there are radicalized people right here in America.
Absolutely.
And unless we change the mentality of these people, we're going to see, unfortunately, two things happen. We'll see some of these attacks, even here in America. We'll also see a clamping down on freedom, which isn't good for anyone. But you see, freedom only works when you have what I would call governing yourself accordingly. You have to govern yourself.
And your phone.
Before you can have freedom. Otherwise, you have totalitarian state cracking down on everybody.
Exactly.
And so I think that there has to be a solution because German people are great people now, right? These are the same people that went en masse and threw other people into ovens and created World War II. And if you can turn those kind of folks around,
Well, they're now accepting a large portion, if not most, of the refugees fleeing from multiple nations south of the Mediterranean Sea.
Absolutely. And then you got Japanese folks who
Yeah.
were among the most of the virulent
Mhm.
people who were about radical ideas and ideas of world domination, and now they're just happily making, stuff, and they have a great economy, and they're partners of the world, and this only took 70 years or even less.
Yeah.
So I don't believe it's a hopeless situation, but unless you change what I like to refer to as the heart, mind, and spirit of people, you're going to keep seeing this repeat itself over and over again, because history does repeat itself. I'm Al Spry.
And Tom McCullough.
This is called the American Roundtable. We're going to have Jim Marshall and Thomas Fawcett of Serenity Springs Recovery Center
Great.
on next. Hi, welcome to American Roundtable. Welcome back. I'm Al Spry. I'm here with two gentlemen from the Serenity Springs Recovery Center in Edgewater, Florida, and also in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. We have to welcome Thomas Fawcett on this end, and Jim Marshall. Jim is an owner of the facility, and Tom is a director of marketing and former client. Welcome, gentlemen, to American Roundtable.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start things open with the general questions about addiction and recovery, because that's basically why we have you on. I just found out a distinctly scary statistic, that is that the Orlando area is now number 2 market for heroin use. And it's being done by middle-class folks, folks of all walks of life. This is not just relegated to any certain segment of society. So this is something new, I would believe. Would you agree with that?
Something new to be in a community like Orlando. Before, it used to mainly stay in the inner city areas of projects, things of that nature, throughout the country. Now it's reached all the suburbs, so now they're calling it an epidemic. But it's actually been an epidemic for the last 15, 20 years. But now it's actually starting to hit the white-collar, higher income brackets of people in the suburbs.
What's causing that?
Well, it's the Oxycontin and Roxycontin that started it. It was actually back in I'm a former narcotics detective from New Jersey. And I got to work with DEA undercover. I got to work with the state police. And back then, a white male could not buy heroin. I used to have to prick my arm to buy heroin undercover with a lead pencil to show that I was an addict. Yeah, come on, I'm not a cop, I'm an addict. Now it's very easy for any white male to buy heroin anywhere in the country. It's just a phone call away. And that was not like that back in the 80s.
Would you say that the drug war is a complete and utter failure, and why?
It's a complete utter failure because pharmaceutical companies are making so much money. And just to say, well, if we legalize drugs, that's going to end the problem. Well, Oxycontin and Roxycontin's legal. Xanax is legal. It's not going to solve the problem. The problem is the root of how they're treating the problem. That's what the problem is. 80% of the people that are incarcerated in our prisons right now are addicts. And not that they're out there selling marijuana or they're selling coke and they've gotten high a few times. They have to have their drug of choice. They have to rob, they have to steal, any means possible. And Tommy could actually talk a lot about that with the things, people that he would steal from. You'd steal from your own mom and dad, your neighbor. You don't care. You have to get the drugs.
Well, let me ask you tell us about your story, Tom.
Well, I guess it's kind of relatable to what we were just talking about. I went to high school. I was very social. I played a lot of sports. I guess popular within my own group. And I went to college. I went to school for criminal law at first, and then I finished with a psychology degree, which I had above a 3.0 GPA. I joined a fraternity, as most American college kids do, and I was a big drinker, and I started to use cocaine early on. By 26, just to speed it up here, by 26, I'm in my first treatment center for cocaine use. I went to that treatment center for 26 days. I got out, and by this time, it's 2006, 2007, the Roxicet, the Oxycontin are very big all over the streets in New Jersey. So I was able to kind of take away with the cocaine use, and I started to do the pills. And if you talk to most heroin addicts, that's exactly where it begins. It's with the Vicodin, which leads into a Percocet, which leads into stronger OxyContin, which eventually leads into heroin use, whether or not you're sniffing it or using it IV. I think the end result for most of us are IV. During that 6-year period between 2006 and 2012, I'm doing anything necessary to quit. I want to quit. I don't want to steal my mom's wedding ring. I don't want to rob my friends. I don't want to be the person who I am. I mean, I was on a trajectory for to be a professional, and I just got hooked, as so many of us do. And then they call it the kind of the point of no return. And I was certainly at that point of no return, and I tried so many different outlets, things to get clean. Suboxone and methadone were an end-all be-all for me. I believed in that. I went to my first, I was going to say my first treatment center, but I went to a treatment center late in 2012, and that treatment center was Serenity Springs Recovery Center. I'm a former client. I was part of the original 3 who walked through the door, and I soon took notice that what I was experiencing was a complete 180 of what I ever experienced before. And very, very early on, something that I grasped quite quickly was somebody sat me down and said, Tom, do you think that you have the choice on whether or not to use heroin? And I said, yeah, I do. I think I have the choice. It's my decision to use heroin.
Which is what he was told by other treatment centers. You have a choice. You have to make a decision. Are you going to use or you're not going to use? He cannot make that decision. He's one of the 10% of the population cannot make that decision on their own. He did not decide to be a heroin addict.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't decide to be homeless. I wouldn't decide to rob my mom's wedding ring. I wouldn't decide to destroy every relationship that I had up to this point. I mean, I was a very social guy. I had a lot of good friends. I had fraternity brothers, and every relationship, every friendship that I ever had up until this point was destroyed. I wouldn't choose to do that, but it was with the no choice for heroin. If I don't use today, I'm going to die. That's how I felt. And so when I walk into Serenity Springs, I mean, this message of recovery that from what I knew up to this point, again, was a complete 180.
We'll get to that, but let me ask you this: how long were you addicted?
How long was I addicted? They say you don't get addicted in one day. I think I am part of that 10%, and I've always been addicted.
But how would you say? How long were you in the grip of the heroin?
6 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
And how old are you now?
I'm 35.
And from what age to what age were you addicted?
I would say from age 27 to 31.
Okay, so up until 4 years ago, you were still in the grip of this.
Yes.
And when you say it destroyed every relationship, everything, anyone that you knew, is it just because we were stealing, obviously, from folks? And
Well, I mean, my disease is centered in my mind. It's centered around selfishness and self-centered, right? So I'm going to do anything necessary in order to get what I need, and that means walking over everyone, and it doesn't matter.
Which is not different than what we're seeing in Paris, because the people that attack other people in Paris are only concerned with themselves. They have
Correct.
huge egos.
Correct.
And they have to kill because they feel it's necessary. They don't. It's like a version of an addiction. Instead of being addicted to a drug, you're addicted to violence and a certain type of point of view. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's your mindset. If your mindset is, if other treatment centers, other people tell you must go through these different things to feel better about yourself, you're going to have, how many wives is it, 20 wives or 50 wives if you kill all these people that don't agree with you?
I've heard 72 virgins, of course. But if you give them the women now and they have a lot of sex, maybe that'll take their mind off of wanting to kill other people. That's what I say. Why wait till you go to blow yourself up?
Much better to substitute that than for killing somebody, that's for sure.
So you were addicted, and you seem like just an average fella.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have an idea of an addict of being a dreg of society and a lower class of society, or so many addicts they know as people who could afford the drugs. Back in the 80s and 90s, it was Wall Street people, rich people,
Sure,
because these drugs were very expensive. Now they're very cheap. I guess it's the underside of capitalism, where the more production, the cheaper it gets.
Well, heroin back in the 80s was $20 a bag in New Jersey, 15 to $10 a bag in New York City, where most of it came in to New York City where they would sell it. Now you can get it for $4 to $5 a bag, and that's scary.
That's crazy
It's really
because now
scary.
it's really easy to get and it's cheap and once you're hooked, I guess you're hooked. What happened the first time you tried it? Was it an instant? You were just instantly hooked.
Yeah, as I said, it started with low doses of opioids, which was Vicodin. These were more
So it started with Vicodin.
Vicodin and then Percocet, which were all obviously they're on the streets and they're coming from doctors, and I think that's a big part of the problem. Society doesn't want to take a look at that. In my opinion, these doctors are no different from the dope man on the corner, to be honest.
Well, every other ad I see on TV now is a drug ad.
That's
They
correct.
used to be banned from television, and now every other ad I see is a drug ad. So basically, the message is, if it's a prescription drug, it's always fine. Is that the kind of mentality you're fighting
One
against?
of the hardest things to do is when we get a client to explain to them, just because it was given by a doctor, doctors have zero training for the most part in addiction. So when they give someone something, I'll give you an example of that. When you go under anesthesia, you're first given something that's going to relax you. So you're going to be given a benzo. Then they're going to give you something to put you to sleep, which is going to be an opiate. Then they're going to give you something to get you out of it, which is going to be a stimulant. So Tom cannot go and have an operation without expecting some type of a problem. And nobody addresses that. He's that 10% that's going to have a problem if he gets a tooth pulled. Because just the stuff that they're going to give him just to numb his gums is going to get him a craving that he wants more of it, which is cocaine at that time. So it's such a complex disease, but yet so easily fixed when it's done the right way, when it's done the proper way. And that's one of the reasons why we have some of the highest success rates in the country.
So the mentality of doctors now is just relieve pain. They don't think about addiction.
Exactly. Once they started getting into the pain management business, that's when things got completely out of control.
And of course, this isn't just physical pain from accidents. This is mental pain, right? So let's talk a little bit about depression in America and bipolar and how people are being overprescribed some of these things.
50% of the people that come into our center are diagnosed bipolar. So far, not one has been bipolar. And that's pretty scary. We have one of the greatest psychiatrists, Dr. Casanova. We also work with Dr. Humiston and Dr. De Silva, and they're just disgusted by it because it's just overprescribed medications that you don't need. Tom, how many times?
I was diagnosed bipolar in every single treatment center that I ever went to, and really, after I was educated, in order for me to apply a solution of recovery, I have to first understand what I suffer from. So I was educated on what I suffered from, and
What were you educated that you were suffering from?
I suffer from a mental obsession of the mind and a physical allergy of the body. And I was
What of
just-
the body?
A physical allergy.
A physical allergy.
That's correct. So when I put something in my body, I can't control the amount I take.
Mhm.
So when I wake up in the morning, and this is kind of derivative of the triggers. People want to talk about triggers and staying away from triggers. If they understood what an addict suffers from, they would understand that an addict just needs to wake up to be triggered. He doesn't need to go by the dope man or the liquor store to be triggered because he suffers from a mental obsession of the mind. And this is the kind of education that I got up into this point. And when I was told that I suffer from a mental obsession, which we go back to, I don't have a choice on whether or not to use because I'm mentally obsessed about the drug. And then a physical allergy, once I put one in, I can't control the amount I take. And then a spiritual malady. I'm constantly restless, irritable, discontent. I need something to take me out of the way I feel, to put me into the present.
We'll talk more with these gentlemen. It's pleased to have Thomas Fawcett and Jim Marshall there with Serenity Springs Recovery Center. I'm Al Spry. This is American Roundtable. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry here with Jim Marshall and Tom Fawcett of Serenity Springs Recovery Center here in Central Florida. And very happy to have you gentlemen back with us.
Thank you.
Let's talk more about this idea of addiction because I know a lot of people who are addicted to prescription drugs, that are addicted to prescription drugs more likely of the mind, Vicodin, Percocet, Xanax, uppers, downers, but they feel it's okay because they feel they have a medical problem and the doctor is treating it, and so they're in the clear, except they can't get off this stuff, and if they end their prescription, they're drastically and searching for a doctor to fill it, and it becomes almost a panic. Let's talk about more, because this idea about the mental obsession and physical allergy is quite interesting to me, because no one ever phrases it like that. They always just say, well, they have a mental disorder like a bipolar, so they need this medicine, or they've been injured, so they need this medicine. And then it can turn into, obviously, what you had, which was the heroin addiction, which you have recovered from due to these folks at Serenity Springs. So I'll turn this question to you, Jim. Talk more about the mental obsession idea, physical allergy, and how you guys treat that.
I like to describe it best as if you're allergic to bees, a bee sting, and you get stung by a bee, for a judge to look at you and say, you're going to go to jail if you're allergic to that bee sting. If you get stung by a bee and you can't stop, you're choking, you're going to choke and you can't breathe, you're going to go to jail. Well, that's what he's telling them when he tells a drug addict. If you have a dirty urine, you're going to go to jail. Well, he's going to have a dirty urine because he cannot stop.
By dirty urine, you mean
he's going to use drugs. He's going to use some type of a drug to get by the next few weeks before he gets sentenced again. And it's more or less expecting them to fail because they're addicts. They cannot stop on their own. And then if you go to a treatment center, they start talking about, well, there's these different triggers that you have to think about. I want you to think about what happened to you. They're going to tell you, what happened to me last time I was high. They're going to think of the good things that happened to them, not the bad things, because their mind is wired differently.
Yeah.
An addict's mind is wired differently. When I went to DEA school, they told me if 10 people take heroin, if 10 people take cocaine, they're all going to be addicted. That's so far from the truth. 20% will have a problem, 10% cannot stop using that drug.
What got you out of being in the DEA? What turned you to something else?
Well,
was it seeing this arbitrariness?
It's just horrible the way drugs are being treated for the most part, but it has changed a lot in New Jersey and in Florida as well, where they're starting to treat it like a disease of the brain. You don't choose to be an addict. No one chooses that life, and you don't know. If there's 10 people in a room, one of them has a very good chance of being an addict. And you don't know until you try to stop. Then you realize, I can't stop. Now what do I do?
Well, the interesting thing is many people are functional users of these type of drugs and never become addicted.
Especially alcoholics.
Especially alcoholic, marijuana,
Yeah.
other drugs. I know people that are professionals, successful. Everything's going fine in their life, and they use some type of drug.
Yes.
And they're not addicted, and they never have a problem with the law, and they don't have the problems that you had with your family and losing your relationships. But like you just said, but for those people that do have this predisposition or allergy, and combined with the mental obsessive quality, equaling addictive personality, then I guess that would be. It sounds to me like there's really no choice. You get hooked, and then you're in, and then that's it.
That's it.
And then you go to your doctor. This is the part. You go to your doctor. Your doctor's going to give you some type of a benzo because you're over. I just got to relax you. So they give you a benzo, which is going to make you think everything's great when you're even getting worse, and that's part of the problem.
Tell me about benzos. What are some brands of that, and what happens when you take those?
Let Tom.
Well, I mean, the obvious, the most popular brand of a benzo is Xanax.
Xanax.
Yeah,
Klonopin.
What's that? The mother's little helper, Xanax.
Yeah, the mother's little,
years,
which traditionally, when Xanax was started to be prescribed, was really just a 3-day protocol for when someone you lost a loved one. For a funeral.
Wasn't supposed to be.
It wasn't supposed to be this end all be all. So the thing is that humans are supposed to have anxiety. We're supposed to feel and be emotional. Anxiety, to me, in my opinion, is nothing more than a fight or flight. I mean, it's kind of just let's reel it in and let's work through it. Let me reach towards something other than myself for help. And what we do, just as humans in general, is we're constantly really just involved with ourselves, and the addict kind of takes that to the next level.
In other words, there's a self-obsessive quality to society, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
That is more than ever.
If you ever hold the door open for somebody and they walk right by you and don't say thank you, you get upset. You get filled with resentment because you're making that altruistic act about you. We constantly make things about us. We're constantly making things
or
about
when
us.
you're in the traffic and road rage.
Exactly.
Road rage, to me, is an aberration of the mind because the person that you may thought have cut you off is not even paying attention to you.
Correct.
They have you not even in mind. They're probably just thinking they want to get somewhere, and there's an
Yeah.
open lane, and you're back there cursing them out, and you may even pull up alongside of them and offer to beat them up
Yeah.
or shoot them.
Yeah.
And so, I never really understood that. But I used to be a guy who used to get upset if someone would cut me off.
Mm-hmm.
It was an ingrained
Same
thing
here.
that I learned from my mom,
Yeah.
who used to yell at everybody on the road. And, I learned to yell at people on the road. Now, I just don't care. I just keep driving. It doesn't bother me. I've decided to turn that switch off.
Yeah.
And I think it's a lot of times it's a conscious decision to turn that mental switch
Yes,
off
yes.
and not be worried about if someone cuts you off or doesn't open the door for you. Tell me about your treatment and how it helped you to recover.
Well, as I said, I mean, it was a complete 180 of what I was used to. First of all, what I was exposed to before this were 150 strong rehab facilities with men and women. Really, any treatment center that has men and women combined, in my opinion, now after being sober for 3 years and in the industry, really have nothing to do or don't want anything to do with people's recovery. So that was something that was different right away. It was a 12-bed facility. All male. The staff was
Very small.
very small, very small. I was not an insurance policy. I wasn't. They knew my name. It was very intimate. It was like a family setting. I mean, this gentleman right here, he's the owner of Serenity Springs, would walk up to me every day and hug me, which was just it was mind blowing. I immediately felt a part of. One thing that I was also, as I mentioned before, I was explained to what I suffered from. I was explained that I suffer from a mental obsession, a physical allergy, a spiritual malady, the fact that I have no choice. Because I always thought I had a choice. I thought I was doomed. I didn't know. So again, in order for me to apply that solution of recovery, I need to know what I suffer from. It's like telling a cancer patient to go work on his cancer if he doesn't even know he has it. And I didn't know what I was suffering from. So that was immediately different. The 12 steps. I was not just... it wasn't just talked about. I worked all 12 steps.
What are the 12 steps for people that don't know?
The 12 steps are a plan of recovery that was implemented in the 1930s, and where it first came about was Bill Wilson, and he is the author and basically the guy who started Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's just a plan of recovery. It's not just about putting the drugs and alcohol down. The same reason why somebody goes to jail for 6 years, does not use drugs and alcohol, right? Gets out, the day he gets out after not using for 6 years, goes and uses. Because for a long time, I just figured if I can just put down the drugs and the alcohol, I'd be okay.
Yeah, get it out of your system.
Drugs
so
and
to speak.
alcohol aren't the problem. I'm the problem. That's why this geographic change, like you got to get out of New Jersey, Tom, or you got to go somewhere else, or you need new friends. It's a bunch of BS. It really is, because I carry me with me.
So you gentlemen are both from New Jersey?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Is that where this started, the Serenity Springs?
No,
or you
we
just
started
happen
in
to-
Florida.
You just happen to be both from New
Yeah,
Jersey.
yeah.
So, how many times had you been to recovery before this? Before you
I went to
came
5
here?
different treatment centers.
Long time. That's a lot.
Yeah. 5
And
different
you didn't have any luck.
I mean, I would put together a couple days, or I would go in for cocaine, as I said, and I'd come out and use opiates. Or I'd go in for opiates and come out and use cocaine.
So you were
or
using
drink.
various drugs.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Anything to get me out of the way I feel.
how did it finally click to you? And you've been clean now and recovered for 4 years. Congratulations.
Thank you so
by the
much.
way.
I appreciate it.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
You must feel wonderful that you see
Makes
this young
me feel
man
good.
recovered. And what was the light that went off in your head where you decided this was it? This was the last time I was ever going to be in one of these places as a patient.
Well, I remember 2 weeks into it, I was talking to one of the advocates there, and he was explaining to me, like, Tom, maybe you should try to stay and see out the residual program. And I was like, no, I'm going back to New Jersey after 30 days. I started to be more educated about what I suffer from and how to apply a solution. And I started to figure, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And I have to change. It's the drugs and the alcohol are removed. Now what am I going to do? I can't be the same person I was in my addiction. I can't objectify women. I have to pay my bills. I have to make my bed. Because really, I'm going to be the same person walking around just without the drugs and the alcohol.
The one point I just want to make is when people come into treatment, I tell them if they do this work, they are going to get better. I've never not seen it work. That's what makes me feel good. I know if they do this work, then they're going to get better, and you can't ask for anything better than that. A 20% success rate, to me, which most of the industry has, just isn't acceptable.
And what is your success rate?
It's close to 80%.
That's a huge success rate.
Yes.
That's above and beyond industry standard. Above and beyond. I went to a treatment center in New Jersey that was 2%.
We'll talk more. If you hold that thought we'll talk more with Jim Marshall and Thomas Fawcett of Serenity Springs Recovery Center. I'm Al Spry. This is the American Roundtable. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry. This is Politics is Unusual. We're talking about addiction and recovery today with Jim Marshall and Thomas Fawcett of Serenity Springs Recovery Center. Of course, Jim is to this side of me. Thomas is this side to me. And I'd like to turn to you, Jim, and talk about why you got into this business. You were working with DEA. Obviously, you've been interested in stopping the scourge of drugs for a long time. But what made you choose to own a recovery center?
Well, I realized that 80% of the population in prisons are addicts. They can't stop. And they're not in prison, like I said before, for so much selling drugs that they cannot stop committing crimes to get the drugs of their choice. And my son, turns out, he's an addict. As my grandfather was an alcoholic, I skipped a generation with my father. So my father always said, don't drink, don't do drugs. So I never drank, never did drugs. Or I could be in the same boat as my son, because you don't know until you try it and you use it. And even if you don't like it, as my son did not enjoy drinking or like drinking, it would just make him feel better about himself. And that's when I realized something has to be done. I sent him to other treatment centers. Not too much success. Finally, I sent him to one in Texas. Texas is probably about 10 years ahead of other states in their treatment. And it was a spiritual solution that he found. It's a 3-part disease: mental, physical, and spiritual. And I said, I can do a better job than these other places that he went to. And that's when Serenity Springs was formed.
So it's a mind, body, spirit. What does that mean? A lot of people hear spirit and they think religion and organized religion, which a lot of folks are turned off by nowadays because of the dogmatism. But what do you refer to it as?
God. God's got to come into your life and completely immerse you and change your life, change your way of thinking. If you don't have that, good luck. And people that are come in are atheists, of the Jewish faith, of the Christian faith, of the Muslim. It doesn't matter. So long as you feel that there's a higher power than you are, and Tom can probably explain even better than I can, that you must have that completely change your life. As I'm sure you have changed your life with the things with the road rage. Just things happen to you and you realize, like, why was I doing that? Why was I thinking that? Because it's a disease of the brain. So you have to change the way the brain is thinking.
Why don't you talk a little bit on that?
Well, I mean, as far as like the spiritual, if it's a 3-part disease, the solution is spiritual as well. Just a mustard seed of hope. But as far as me as an addict, we talked about what I suffer from as a mental obsession, a physical allergy, and also a spiritual malady. And what that means is I'm constantly restless, irritable, and discontent. I'm never happy right here, right now. I'm never in the present. What drugs did for me was they put me in the present. So if I have something big to do, I have to get high on heroin in order to do that. And if we just want to reverse that to what recovery has done for me, recovery has put me into the present, right here, right now.
And when you say in the present, you mean you're not thinking about the future or the past.
I'm not thinking about the resentment of yesterday and the fear of tomorrow. I'm right here, right now.
Well, that's something that the Buddha talked about being happy. The secret to happiness is just being now, here, right now, like we are in this studio with you here on American Roundtable, and not worrying about the past or regrets or things you could have done differently, and not worrying about how am I going to pay the bills next month, because you may not be here next month. You may die in your sleep tomorrow. You don't know.
Correct, yeah.
So having worries about things, I tell people a good way to avoid worry is to not constantly inundate yourself with 24-hour news cycles. I'm all about knowing what's going on. I think it's important to know about current events and talk about them and try to find solutions. But I think 24-hour news cycles like Fox and CNN and MSNBC, which constantly put news at you, gives you a feeling of worry. I mean, how could you not be worried?
Start getting depressed.
Yeah. In the moments we have left, let's talk about the immunotherapy. This is a very interesting idea, and I've never heard it before.
I met Dr. De Silva in New Jersey, when I was talking about doctors and the problems with doctors giving out all the drugs, and he introduced me to Dr. Humiston of California and telling me about how great this therapy works. It's all natural amino acids that's given through intravenous. I went out to California for over a year, my son and I, and tried it out with different clients because they're licensed for it, and it works amazing. Tom had it done.
Mm-hmm.
It works for all different types of drugs. It's not done in like a 1 hour drip. It's an 8 hour drip, which can take anywhere from 5 to 10 days, depending upon your drug of choice. And Dr. Humiston trained our doctor here in Florida, Dr. Casanova, and it just works wonders. She loves it. The addicts that we've had there so far love it. I mean, it just works
Takes
wonders.
away a craving, like the
Takes away
cravings?
the craving, just clears your brain. There's actually chunks of the brain that's missing because your brain's 70% fat and water. And if you can repair that rapidly, then...
Because
we have a
amino
better
acids are a
chance.
type of fat. So
Yes.
basically you're replacing those depleted areas.
Yes.
And the bottom line is this country is just, I think, over the methadone and the Suboxone. And as an addict, you cannot fix a drug habit with a drug.
Yeah, it's more just like putting a Band-Aid on it.
Putting a Band-Aid on it. And I'm just going to, I ended up IV using Suboxone. And one of the things that is different about our program is the amino acids, is the MAPS monitoring accountability program, the residual program that we have to offer that follows the addict up to a year after they leave Serenity Springs. And this is how we gather our statistics through the third party of MAPS.
And MAPS must love you guys.
MAPS loves us. We love MAPS. And
Where can people find out more about Serenity Springs? Here's your chance to give some information out about your program.
If you could show the brochure, that's the best thing to...
Yeah.
It's on our website, our phone number. Our phone number-
www.serenityspringsrecovery.com is our website. And our phone number is 386-423-4540.
386-423-4540.
So SerenitySpringsRecovery.com is easy for people to remember. Let's give that out one more time. SerenitySpringsRecovery.com. Jim Marshall, Thomas Fawcett, thank you very much,
Thank
gentlemen,
you,
for
sir.
being here with us. We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
And appreciate your time. Thank you again. And we'll be right back on American Roundtable. Welcome back to the American Roundtable. I'm Al Spry.
With Tom McCullough.
It's great to have Tom here. It's great to have you here. This is the no, what do we call it? The straight talk, no BS zone.
That's
We
right.
also call it Politics is Unusual. Governor Rick Scott is calling on Congress to oppose Syrian refugees. This is the Florida governor. In the wake of the attacks on Paris, he demanded that Congress act to block Syrian refugees coming to the U.S. Of course, many of these people, if not almost all, are fleeing the terrorists, so I'm not thinking they're going to be terrorists. But I also have a problem with pigeonholing a whole group of people based on the actions of a few. We've seen that in the past, and it doesn't ever end up very well. And so I think that the governor is, of course, a political animal. We all know that. He is, he is looking at a future Senate run, I'm guessing. So he's positioning himself as tough on terrorism by refusing entry of immigrants. I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think right now it's timing is everything, and it's a good time. House Speaker Paul Ryan announced today he wants to see a pause. Let's all get our breath here before we start bringing all of these refugees into the country. And part of that is questionable, too. They say they're going to be vetted, yet how many people are underground that might be from ISIS who haven't committed a crime where there's anything to vet? It's just a person with a Syrian passport, which could be people from Afghanistan, Egypt, Iraq, any North African country. They're managing to get paperwork suggests that they're Syrians, so they're quote-unquote refugees. Mm-hmm. So the floodgate isn't just open, it's wide open, and you've got a lot of people who aren't happy just being on the other side of a fence in Turkey where they're having their day-to-day needs met. It's like, how do I get to where the good stuff is, which is Germany and Sweden and the UK and points of the Euro nation. So now we can go to the U.S. Who's not going to want to get in that line? So we're like saying, wait a minute, while this is unsettled and we don't absolutely have clarity who's actually coming over, let's take a pause, let's take a moment and make sure that as the federal government insists that we can override a state's decision and plant these refugees in their state, the states, I think, have a right to say, wait a minute, let's take a look at who you're bringing in here, particularly in light of the mass numbers that are coming over here. And if we start with 10,000, I don't think that's going to be the last boat or plane that comes over from that region of the world, particularly with the weight that's on the Euro nation to absorb most of the bodies at this point. So I'm not against a pause, but we need to make sure that we use that pause to fully go through a process where we can still say we're going to embrace and open our arms to the truly needy, the true refugees, and do our best case to make sure that that's who ultimately ends up living and being supported by our great nation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm all for helping refugees personally. I just think you need to let the right ones in, and if there's any question, I think you need to keep them out. I mean, we saw with the Mariel boat lift 35 years ago what happened when Castro sent
Opened up
all
the
of their
asylums and
and all of his prisons and said take everyone, and we said okay.
Sure.
And didn't do any vetting, and we had a huge crime problem in the country as a result, and especially in Miami area and into Florida for many years. And there, it's something that you want to be thoughtful about and not do as a knee-jerk reaction, because whenever you do knee-jerk reactions, they tend to really mess things up.
And quickly mentioning those that are online legally trying to gain access to the country, all of a sudden they're second seated.
This is Al Spry.
And Tom McCullough.
Thank you. We'll see you next time on American Roundtable.